What's cracking, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Berger Reviews. Today we're going to be taking a look at Satisfactory. So what is Satisfactory's genre, and how would I describe the game? Well, Satisfactory is primarily about automation, ratios, and building, with minor elements of exploration and a whole lot of room for creative expression. Now, I don't want to waste your time, so let's get straight to the point. Overall, I give Satisfactory 4 burgers out of 5. Let's go ahead and break it down into some topics here. I'll start with some more general topics that could apply to pretty much any game, and then we'll take a look at some more genre or title specific topics. Now, the first topic that I'd like to cover is gameplay. Satisfactory's gameplay gets 4 burgers out of 5 from me. So when you're committing to playing a well done automation factory game, you first have to know what you're getting yourself into. These games generally involve a lot of math and ratios, although you can technically play them without worrying about that as much as I initially did myself. They're also known for being extremely time-consuming and addictive, and not in a, haha, oh man, I played for hours kind of way, but more like an, oh crap, it's 4 in the morning and I forgot to eat dinner kind of way. Now, both Satisfactory and Factorio also have a plethora of really well-done quality of life features that generally put them a tier above most games in pretty much any genre. Factorio does do this a little bit better, and you will hear me reference that a lot in this review, but Satisfactory does not fall short, and it does it extremely well as well. So that's why I give Satisfactory's gameplay 4 burgers out of 5. Now, the next general topic that I want to talk about is the difficulty and learning curve in this game. Now, just a reminder, this is not difficulty in the sense of 1 being super easy and 5 being super hard. This is more, how did the game devs implement the learning curve and the levels of difficulty in this game? Was it well done, or was it poorly executed? So let's take a look at kind of my oil processing here, one of my oil processing areas as we talk about this. Overall, I give Satisfactory's difficulty and learning curve 4 burgers out of 5. If you're into this kind of game, the learning curve is implemented very well, and honestly, it's quite gradual. You slowly build up to a larger and larger scale in a more multiplicative kind of way, rather than an additive kind of way. However, due to some major difficulty jumps that are inevitable in this type of game, and I'm looking at you, crude oil processing, right here, I couldn't give it a perfect score. There was a lot of middle ground here where I almost wanted to give it a 4.5 in some categories, but I'm trying to keep it on a scale of 1 to 5, so that's why I gave it a 4 out of 5. The game also feels like it deals with byproducts a lot more than its counterparts, but that's easily balanced out with the awesome sink. So as you can see here, we have a bunch of crude oil being pumped up through that pipeline, and it's being stored here, and it's being produced into various different things. The crude oil is turned into plastic and heavy oil residue. So the heavy oil residue is something that needs to be dealt with one way or another. You can turn it into various different things, but it's a byproduct that you have to deal with. So if we follow the assembly line even further down, we can see that the heavy oil residue is now being turned into fuel, so on and so forth. So you might find yourself in situations where you're like, what do I do with all this petroleum coke or whatever, and I'm not sure how to handle it or what to do with it. Well, that is where the awesome sink comes in. So in the most ideal scenario, you would balance everything out to the perfect ratios. You can see that I got a bunch of excess fuel stored here, and a lot of the fuel is being turned into electricity in these generators. But you might not want to deal with all of that. You might want to just get rid of it and take out the whole byproduct difficulty from the equation completely. So as I mentioned, in order to do that, we have the awesome sink. And here is the beautiful awesome sink in all of its glory. You can see that I'm just belting a few things into it. There's a lot of different things that get attached to this, and I kind of attach and detach them as necessary when I need to get rid of a bunch of byproduct. For example, my aluminum over there was getting really full a lot of the time, so one of the earlier products in the assembly line, I would just dump it into the sink. It turns anything that you put into it into points, which then can be turned into coupons. Coupons can be spent at the shop to buy certain things that are kind of useful, like different kinds of walls, to things that are completely non-functional but are cool, like the coffee cup, to things that are extremely useful, like the factory cart, which I would highly recommend unlocking as your very first thing in pretty much any playthrough with the awesome sink and the awesome shop. But I digress. The point of this is, if you don't want to deal with byproducts or you want to simplify byproducts, then you can just dump them into the sink. And it can handle as fast as your belts can pump. So if we look at some of the higher tier belts here, I've got everything unlocked in this game. The highest belt, 780 resources per minute. So that's as many as you can pump in there. I believe you can build more than one awesome sink. For some reason I always thought it was only one, but we were able to build two in another game, so I'm not sure how that works, but I think it should work just fine. So that's why I give Satisfactory's implementation of its difficulty and learning curve 4 burgers out of 5. Now the next topic that I'd like to talk about is replayability, replay value. I give Satisfactory's replayability value 5 burgers out of 5. Now let's take a look at the very tippy top of my factory here, or at least my production area, as I talk about this. Once there's enough content available for an automation game, the replay values become insane, and Satisfactory is no exception in this regard. At the time of writing this review, I have 250 hours played or more, and that's completely vanilla and almost entirely single player. I could easily see myself spending another 250 more, if not even more than that, playing modded or in a multiplayer game if I wanted to, or I could just keep scaling up the desert factory that I've already built here. I was actually working on scaling it up quite a bit, but I got a little bit burnt out towards the end here, which I'll talk about in a little while. That being said, despite the burnout, I got 250 plus hours out of it before I started feeling the least bit burnt out, and I could easily see myself coming back to it. Now, another aspect of the replay value of this is that if you're into kind of Minecrafting it and building things, you can see over there I have like a fully enclosed building, and that's got a ton of just giant batteries in it, basically. Yeah, I've got a massive tower over there and a whole big old sky thing. There's so much room for creative expression and for building and making structures. You can do all kinds of like pixel art kind of things. There's conveyor belt art. There's all kinds of really cool stuff that you can do in this game. Now, it doesn't have the same level of like complexity that the circuit system has in Factorio, but there's so much that you can do in this game, and because you're working with a 3D space, it gives you the ability to build these pretty massive structures. So if you like Minecrafting it, and you like just making cool big towers and buildings, you could be the guy in your multiplayer server that does specifically that. So that's why I give Satisfactory's replayability value 5 burgers out of 5. The next topic is visuals. Now I give Satisfactory's visuals 4 burgers out of 5. Satisfactory is very visually pleasing. I mean, just look at my factory here in the moonlight. It's pretty awesome. It's actually optimized quite well, despite having so much for your CPU and your GPU to load, especially once your factory grows a little bit larger, like so, or people have ones that are even significantly larger than what I've built here. However, it has been in early access for a few years, so the graphics are oh so slightly dated. But maybe this is a design choice to minimize the demand on your PC. I think that they can make it look a little bit better for the current state of games. But again, that might be something that they're deciding not to do for a reason. I wanted to wait for daytime for this next part. We can see that we're getting a nice sunrise over there. Another nice visual aspect of this. But if we take a close look at a lot of the buildings here, we can see that a lot of the buildings, the textures for a lot of them are generally just solid or pattern colors, which it actually looks really nice, but it's not as detailed as it could be. So let's take a closer look at some of these things. See, I got the pink and black scheme going. It's something that I personally chose, but there's not a whole lot of detail. There's like some pasted on screw looking things there, and just a big blank pink area on most things. Now don't get me wrong, like it's not completely barren, right? Like there's some detail there for sure. But again, it's been out for a few years already. It's been in early access this whole time. So I feel like the visuals on the machines and stuff and the textures could be a little bit better. But that's in today's modern gaming world where everything tends to look, well, not everything, but a lot of games that try to look nice look really nice for the most part. We've got a lot of room for a lot of detail. Satisfactory falls short on that a little bit. But again, I just want to reiterate that that's not necessarily very important here, because this game is not fully about looking nice. It does look very nice, but the main aspect of something like this is the gameplay, right? Is the automation. I was on the borderline of giving it a 5 out of 5, but I felt like since there was minor room for improvement, then I should go ahead and give it a 4 out of 5. It was another one where I was like, oh, should I do a 4.5? But I'm trying to stick to those solid numbers there. So, overall, I give Satisfactory's visuals 4 burgers out of 5. Moving on, the next thing that I would like to discuss is Satisfactory's UI, or user interface. I give Satisfactory's UI a full 5 burgers out of 5. Satisfactory has an extremely well done UI. And there's a number of reasons that I say that. And we can take a look at my main hub here as I talk about this. We can see that if you hit Q, everything's very well organized. You've got different categories. It's pretty easy to find where things are. You can apply things down here. You can scroll to different taskbars and apply different items to the various taskbars. So for example, this is my concrete taskbar. This is my main belt taskbar. This is another concrete. This is my hypertubes, so on and so forth. So the UI just generally is really good. Now, the one thing that I really want to point out here is do not sleep on this to-do list. You may have noticed on the right side of my screen here that I've already got a bunch of things set up. So what I went in and did here is I hit Q. I'm going to clear my list, actually. I hit Q. I went to the things that I wanted to build, and I hit this little plus sign here. So let's say, for example, I'm doing a new oil setup. I know that just for example's sake here, let's say that I need 2 water extractors, I need 1 oil extractor, a refinery, and then I go over to foundations because I'm going to want to put it on a big flat platform, and I'm going to want, say, 500 foundations. Now what it does is it tells me exactly what I need on the right side of the screen here. See on my to-do list, it says water extractor 2, oil extractor 1, etc. It tells me I need 60 copper sheets, and I have 159 on me already, so I have more than what's necessary. It tells me the reinforced iron plates that I need, so on and so forth. So this can be really useful, especially in a game like this, where you notice in my inventory I can't actually carry buildings around with me. This isn't Factorio, this isn't Dyson Sphere program, so you can't actually make a building and carry it around with you. If you delete a building, see, it turns it back into those materials that were used to make it. So you do get full refund, but you have to carry the resources around with you at all times. And this can get to be really tedious when you're trying to remember exactly what you need, which is why I'm telling you, do not sleep on that to-do list. Add things to your to-do list. All the necessary materials will show up on the side here. Very, very useful part of the UI, which is another major reason that I'm rating it so high. Another thing that I do not want you to sleep on is the hit X feature to open up the encyclopedia. I use this countless times to look up various buildings and materials when I couldn't memorize the literally hundreds of recipes that are in this game. You can look at your inbox and your tutorials here, but that's not as important. We're looking more specifically at the recipes. So, we can see here that I need a motor. I need 25 motors. Let's pretend I didn't have enough. So what I can do here is start typing motor. Oh, look. There's the motor. Now I can see what I need to make it. 2 stators, 2 rotors. Crap, how do I make a stator? Well, I hover over it, and it says it right there. It's made from some wires and some steel pipes. So let's say I forgot how to make those wires. So I search wire. Look, wire's the first thing to come up. Oh yeah, it's just made from straight copper ingots. So I know that I'm going to need some copper. I know that I'm going to need some iron as well, because there was some other iron things involved in that recipe. If we look back at motor, we follow the assembly list down. There is iron involved in screws and rods, which are used for this recipe. So this thing is extremely useful. Do not sleep on the to-do list. Do not sleep on the hit X feature to open up the encyclopedia. All of these things combined with just the nice and pleasing UI, the ability to pin things down here where you want them and scroll between different taskbars. Overall, it's just great. I just had to give Satisfactory's UI a full 5 burgers out of 5. Moving on, the next topic that I'd like to discuss is Satisfactory's controls. Overall, I give Satisfactory's controls 4 burgers out of 5. You know, the control set is pretty standard. It'll feel familiar to most gamers. You got W to move forward, A to move left, D to move right, S to move backwards. And then, of course, you've got your mouse swivel to look around in the various different directions. Now, all that being said, one issue that I did have with it, especially early on, is that using C to crouch and slide felt weird at first, but I got used to it, and it can't always be rebound. There are some minor issues with controls that I do have as well, such as the hover pack feeling like it should have like a move in the direction of the cursor option. I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm just being nitpicky with this one, but being able to float at a steady elevation is really nice. But see, if I'm looking down and I'm pressing W, I'm not moving down. I feel like most flight in most games, you're going to move in the direction of the cursor when you press W. But that isn't necessarily the case here. Again, I do see the advantage of being able to float steady, and if you look down, because you want to look at like, oh, that thing down there, and I want to delete that but keep my same height here, yeah, that's super useful. But I think that they should have multiple options. So there's just a few minor issues that I have like that. Again, maybe being nitpicky. But there are some more major ones that bother me even more, such as crouch sliding constantly to go faster. It's a very awkward mechanic. So let's just take that off temporarily. See, so I'm early game, we'll pretend, and I'm jumping around and I want to go a little bit faster. Yeah, I can sprint, but I can also crouch slide, and I can also crouch slide jump. And you'll notice that this actually, you can chain them, and this actually makes you go even faster than you would just running or sprinting, which is a really weird mechanic. It's very awkward. It encourages you to do this all the time early game. And then you pair it with like the Blade Runners here, and you can just crouch slide jump super far, and you can get around much quicker this way until you unlock things like, you know, the hover pack, which is advantageous just because you can fly around everywhere as long as you have power. So that's another reason that I wasn't giving it a perfect score, because of some awkward things like that. But another big, really big thing is no auto run. No auto run. Why? Why is there no auto run in this game? It doesn't make any sense. I'm sure you could fix it with a mod, but you do so much running around, especially early game, before you get vehicles and hypertubes and stuff. Why is there no auto run feature? At least they have a toggle sprint feature, thank goodness, because I can't stand it when games don't have a toggle sprint and don't have an auto run. It's ridiculous. Some games I get it because you don't have to move around as much, or there's various reasons for it. But in a game like this where you're moving around a lot, I feel like they absolutely should have an auto run feature. And lastly, one of my other minor nitpicky complaints is having to use Alt and mouse wheel, or in my case, I rebounded to Control and mouse wheel to cycle through the various recipe taskbar things. It feels a little bit awkward. It feels a little bit clunky at times. I'm not sure how they'd improve that. I'm not a game dev. I'm sure that somebody who's more experienced could come up with a better system. I don't have one off the top of my head, so it's easy for me to say like, oh yeah, they could do a better job, of course, right? But if I'm being nitpicky and I'm trying to point out minor issues that I have, that does feel a little bit awkward, having to hold Control and swivel the mouse wheel, or hold Alt and swivel the mouse wheel to go through your different recipes. So overall, it sounds like I'm having a lot of issues with the controls, but the controls are actually really solid and pretty easy to learn and pretty straightforward. I just wanted to point out the various issues that I did have. That's why overall I give Satisfactory's controls 4 burgers out of 5. The next topic that I want to discuss is Satisfactory's audio. You may have noticed that I turned up the game audio for this one because I want you guys to be able to hear the little bit of music that they have there if it decides to play, and the various sound effects in the game. Overall, I once again give Satisfactory's audio 4 burgers out of 5. The audio doesn't stand out to me as exceptional, which is why I'm not giving it, a 5 out of 5. But it also doesn't really fall short anywhere, so don't get me wrong. It's not like it's terrible. The music is fitting, and it's quite nice, but it isn't quite as masterful and immersive as, say, Astroneer or Divinity Original Sin 2. The machine audio, it's pretty cool, and they do a good job with Ada's voice. I've unlocked most of the things at this point, but if you play pretty much any game, any new file or anything, you'll hear Ada talk. And it sounds pretty cool. It fits. I know it's just like a Google speech thing, but it fits the game pretty well in the theme. So if I were to let's see, if I had to get real close here and listen up. See, we can hear the various machine sounds. And it sounds really cool. But it's just not the kind of game where I really found myself turning up the volume to listen to the music. Honestly, due to the gameplay style, generally I was playing it with a show or a movie or something going on in the background, on Hulu or Netflix or whatever. Because of that, I wasn't super interested or invested in the audio or immersion in general. This isn't really a game that I was playing for a high level of immersion. It's more for the automation and factory aspects of it. Now that being said, I feel like they still did a really decent job with the audio in this game, which is why I'm giving Satisfactory's audio 4 burgers out of 5. The next topic that I would like to discuss for Satisfactory is the overall atmosphere. Satisfactory's overall atmosphere gets 4 burgers out of 5 from me. Now I'm going to have to fight with Ada's voice here, but I wanted to give you guys an example of what she sounds like. And this is the intro animation or cinema or whatever you want to call it here. So everybody, this is not a spoiler. Everybody gets to see this as soon as you start the game. And you get the idea. It gives you this really cool sense of atmosphere. Like she's explaining all this stuff. You're in this weird drop pod. And I mean, let's go ahead and just fast forward it a little bit here. And we'll be able to get a better example of what I'm talking about. Alright, I really like this part. I've always really enjoyed the intro because it's really cool. You've got a whole lot of atmosphere here. I mean, like I said early on, it has an extremely well done atmosphere. And I probably would have given it a 5 out of 5 if it stayed that way. I mean, that was just great. What an awesome intro, and then the pod is there. And I think you're supposed to like disassemble it and stuff. And you can skip all of this, especially once you've played through the game a few times. But I just wanted to give us a sense of the atmosphere. Look, we're like stuck in this alien world. There's weird poison things around there. If I'm a first time player and I landed right here, I might be like, oh hey, what's this? Oh crap, I'm dying. You know, it's really cool. You're stranded on this alien world. But that sense of atmosphere kind of falls off as you progress. Now, don't get me wrong, the atmosphere stays very well done. They did a good job with it, but it doesn't quite sustain that same level of immersion, that same overall atmospheric feeling that it does at the very beginning of the game. As you progress, you focus a lot more on the factory itself, and you become a lot less involved with, you know, the alien world around you. You can always go exploring. You know, you can build this cool rover buggy thing and go all around with it. But really, that's a minor part of the game compared to the building and automation aspects of it. Sure, you can build a giant sky bridge, you can check out all the cool biomes, you can take the buggy out, you can go hard drive hunting. And yeah, hard drives are great, but what do they get you? They get you some alternate recipes, which can be useful, but they're not absolutely necessary. You can play without them. And even if you were to spend a bunch of time doing that, we're talking about, what, a few hours? Versus maybe the hundreds of hours that you would spend building and expanding and optimizing and tweaking your factory to get it to be just how you wanted it to be. Now, as you progress in the game and you begin to focus more on your building and automation, it kind of brings a new sense of atmosphere. The atmosphere of a well-oiled and a fine-tuned machine, or, you know, absolute spaghetti mess that is your factory. However, for me personally, this did not feel quite as immersive as the early game it did, which is why I'm not giving it a full 5 out of 5. So, Satisfactory's atmosphere gets 4 burgers out of 5 from me. Now I'd like to talk about some more title or genre-specific categories. So the next topic that I want to discuss for Satisfactory is the storyline. Satisfactory's storyline, unfortunately, only gets 2 burgers out of 5 from me. Unfortunately, Satisfactory's storyline is currently very underdeveloped, but, you know, for very good reasoning. As we saw earlier when we started a new game, if you don't skip the intro, there's absolutely a story present. But similar to how the atmosphere kind of falls short after a while, the story is part of that. You do get minor elements of story through things like this giant space elevator, which most of you are probably quite familiar with. There's a few lines that Ada says. There's some comedic writings in the hub that we'll probably talk about or discuss or look at later. And of course, there's the mysterious objects found throughout the world, but nothing is ever really explicitly stated or answered. Now, my strong personal belief is that this is because story is an absolute bottom tier priority when it comes to automation-based games. Having a great story is a welcome addition to any game, but nobody's picking up Factorio or Satisfactory and saying, man, I really love the creative writing in that game. They're pretty much always going to be focusing on, the amazingly well done UI, the great quality of life aspects, or the automation aspects of the game. Comparing it to Factorio, Factorio does have a little bit more of a story, but it's also much more further developed. Whereas Satisfactory here is still earlier on in its early access phases. Factorio has already officially launched their 1.0 version. So they've had the time to focus on, their combat systems and their story and things like that. Whereas the Satisfactory devs have probably focused more on things that are important to them, like the gameplay and the automation and the ratios and fixing bugs and stuff like that. So I'm sure that they will incorporate more story as they continue to produce the game. But for now, it falls kind of short, which is why I give Satisfactory's story 2 burgers out of 5. Moving along with the more genre or title specific categories, next I would like to talk about Satisfactory's combat and crafting systems. So I actually divided this into 2 categories this time because I felt like it wasn't a good idea to keep them clumped. Satisfactory's combat system gets a meager 2 burgers out of 5 from me. The combat system is minimal and subpar. You get your weapon, you dodge enemy attacks if necessary, and you poke them to death. So I'll give you an example right here. Oh cool, power slug. Oh no, evil mosquito things that want to kill me. Oh, I killed it with my sword. Wait for it to charge, I kill it with my sword. Okay, cool, they're all dead. That's it. That's the combat system. There is a nail gun, but I never really use it. I've heard it's kind of weak, it's kind of subpar, it's not that powerful. But it's there, and it is a ranged weapon. So if you're looking for combat, this is probably not the game for you. There is a little bit of combat, you can kill things, there are weapons, you can die, but this game is not by any means about the combat. That being said, I don't think that should detract from the overall value or rating of the game in general, because that's not a major focus here, it's just kind of present. And I feel like once they progress further, they'll probably have more time and resources to allocate towards, strengthening and improving the combat system. Again, comparing it to Factorio, you've got a much more fleshed out combat system, but they are much further along in their development. So they've had the time after they perfected everything else, or they just prioritized that earlier on. Either way, it's not super important, but I give Satisfactory's combat system a mere 2 burgers out of 5. Now the crafting system. The crafting system, on the other hand, gets a solid 4 burgers out of 5. Now, just to be clear, when I'm talking about the crafting system, I'm mostly focusing on making buildings and handcrafting things, not automation. The automation is a different aspect of the game. The crafting system, I think it's pretty top-notch and it's pretty well done. It can be a little bit tedious at times, which is why I actually changed this rating from a 5 down to a 4. But this is likely a gameplay design intended to discourage handcrafting and encourage automation. After all, this is a game about automation, right? You have a few things that have to be handcrafted here, like portable miners, your chainsaw, but these are generally things that you're going to make once or twice, other than maybe beacons. But you can't automate all of those. However, when you're handcrafting things at your workbench here, pretty much everything that you can handcraft here can be automated in a building somewhere. However, because of the, you can't put any buildings in your inventory feature, you have to carry around all the materials with you. So again, the to-do list and the press X feature can make this part much easier, because you are going to need to be carrying materials around with you, and you are going to need to be crafting in that sense. You can also just carry some bars or whatever it takes to produce those workbenches and equipment shops. Yeah, it's just bars and rods and plates. And you can make things on hand if you forgot a couple things here and there. But generally, it's a pretty good crafting system, handcrafting and building crafting overall. As I mentioned, you can't automate the production of buildings like you can in Factorio or in Dyson Sphere program. I think this is an intended gameplay design. I'm not too sure. I'm not honestly a big fan of it. Either way, it was easy enough for me to adjust my playstyle to just having various materials in my hand rather than carrying around the various buildings with me. So that kind of changes the way that the crafting system works and how it's implemented into this game compared to some of its, other popular factory game counterparts. Overall, though, I give Satisfactory's crafting system, 4 burgers out of 5. Now I know that I mentioned that I've played this game almost exclusively single player, but I wanted to go ahead and briefly touch up on Satisfactory's multiplayer. So overall, Satisfactory's multiplayer gets a solid 4 burgers out of 5 from me. Multiplayer is a whole ton of fun, and honestly it's implemented quite well, but even the devs have said that it's still unfinished and slightly unstable. You will likely run into minor issues here and there, such as visual glitches like the giant item glitch, desync issues, and occasionally maybe even items disappearing. Overall, it's done quite well, and I've hardly had any problems, but they do exist, so I cannot give it a solid 5 out of 5. Now, one thing that I want to point out to you is to be sure to adjust your network quality settings to the highest possible for all players in the multiplayer section, or session rather. So what you do is you go here to options, you go to gameplay, network quality, and you just set that to ultra. You hit apply, confirm, and that's it. Now I don't know that you necessarily need to have this done for everybody in the game, but I do know that it should be done at least by the host, and by all means it doesn't hurt to have everybody in the game do it. If you don't do that, you'll have a lot more issues in multiplayer, a lot more lagginess, a lot more jumpiness, and things rubber banding and disappearing. So I highly recommend doing that if you're going to play Satisfactory multiplayer. That being said, Satisfactory is a whole ton of fun multiplayer, which is why I easily gave it 4 burgers out of 5. Moving along, and similar to that topic, is Satisfactory's community. I give Satisfactory's community another solid 4 burgers out of 5. Now, I haven't had too much interaction from the community or with the community, but the little bit that I have had has been good. I've posted on Reddit a few times, and people have pretty much always been positive and helpful. When I've spoken with other people about this game, it's almost always highly revered, and rarely, if ever, spoken about negatively. So I can pretty confidently give Satisfactory's community a solid 4 burgers out of 5. The next topics that I want to discuss are the average load and queue times for Satisfactory. Now obviously a game like this doesn't have any queue times, so we're going to go ahead and chalk that one as irrelevant here. But the load times are actually pretty solid, so what we'll do is we'll give it a few testers here. We'll hit new game. Keep in mind that I'm running this on an SSD. We'll call it tester. We'll just choose the grass fields, and we'll hit start game. And let's see approximately how long it takes for us to load into a new game. Now this might be a little bit longer than loading into a game with nothing in it, because it has to load the intro, but you can see either way there, within the time I was just saying that, we're already loaded into this new game. Now, alternatively, I wanted to see what it would take for us to load into a game that is already further along, like the big factory that I've been showing you guys throughout the rest of this video. So let's go ahead and hit continue here, which will bring us right into our desert factory, and we can give it a little bit of a comparison how long it takes to load in here. Now we're in a relatively big part of the factory when we load in, kind of my nuclear production, but it's not a super major condensed part, so we might be having slightly faster load times because of that, but it's still taking a lot longer. Naturally, you're going to be limited by your hardware, so an SSD is always going to load things in faster. Furthermore, the bigger and more complex the factory that you need to load, the longer that it's going to take. So we can see here that it didn't actually take too long, but I've got pretty decent hardware here, so it's probably a little bit easier for me to load into this thing than it is for somebody who might be running on an older computer or who might be running on an HDD. But if you do have at least a semi-decent gaming machine, then you're pretty much golden. You're good to go. I figure this is probably an appropriate time to mention this, but this game is actually very demanding on your hardware, so you'll probably need at least a slightly modern gaming PC just to run it, and your PC will more than likely sound like it's trying to lift off into space when you load into some of the more developed factories, due to the need for all of your fans to be running at top speed as soon as you start up this game. My PC definitely runs louder, and I've heard multiple accounts of other people, my friends, that have said the same thing, that it's very demanding on their computer. Make sure you have a solid CPU, a solid GPU, and probably at least 8 gigs, if not 16 or more of RAM. Don't hesitate to check the system requirements on Steam. You don't necessarily, or you absolutely don't want to start getting into the late game and then learn that your PC can't handle it, because that would be a terrible feeling to progress that far and then suddenly figure out, hey, my PC can't quite handle this and I can't really go further with this factory that I've been working on. All that being said, I give the average load times for Satisfactory a solid 4 burgers out of 5. A little bit of room for improvement, but honestly, they are quite good. Moving right along, the next topic that I want to talk about is the progression system and the feeling of grindiness in Satisfactory. So I give Satisfactory's progression system and the feeling of its grindiness a solid 4 burgers out of 5. We can take a look at the various different tiers here and the various things that they unlock. The progression system in this game feels very good, excluding a few difficulty hurdles that I mentioned earlier in the difficulty and learning curve section, such as, crude oil, byproducts, things like that. You advance pretty steadily, especially early on, and you can definitely feel that advancement as you move on. As you unlock new things, you get more options, you get faster belts, you start to unlock vehicles, you start to unlock jump pads to get around quicker. All kinds of great aspects of advancement, technological progress. That being said, you advance similarly to how you build up in a more multiplicative way rather than additive way, in the sense that the amount of things that you need to do to advance further becomes multiplicatively larger. So you're going to need more and more to advance the more that you advance. At first, you unlock a lot and you progress pretty quickly, but naturally it slows down. However, it does implement this slowing down process quite well. It doesn't feel like you're suddenly going from learning all kinds of new stuff to learning nothing at all. It does take longer, but it's still there and you can still feel the progress. It does start to feel a bit grindy towards the end, if that's even the right term for this kind of game. Progression definitely slows down more and more as you get into the higher tiers here. They recently fully released tiers 7 and 8, which is when I started this factory. And I got all the way up to the end tiers, but it started to become a lot slower and a lot more grindy once I started to get there. Now, this absolutely works for some people, and it worked for me up until the very end of the game where I simply lost interest because I had essentially unlocked everything. So I got to a point where, if we take a look at the space elevator here, I'm just pumping stuff into it at this point. I could essentially just leave this game running and unlock the final tier, unlock everything essentially, unless there's like a hidden tier that I don't know about, by just letting it run. Because everything that the space elevator needs is slowly being produced here. See? Everything's being funneled in. I've already got some of it made. And it would just take a really long time. Now I could go back and I could alter and add to my factory and optimize things and increase my production and make it produce all of that even faster. But after I got to this point, it just felt kind of pointless in a way. There was so much more to unlock and produce and create and ways to advance. And then I kind of just hit this soft wall, so to speak, once I got to these last tiers, especially because I was like, well, there's really nothing after this. So do I really need to unlock that? Overall, though, I think that they did a really, really good job, which is why I give Satisfactory's progression and grindiness a solid 4 burgers out of 5. One of the final topics that I want to discuss about Satisfactory is its humor. Satisfactory gets a solid 5 burgers out of 5 for humor from me. You have to look for the humor in this type of game to find it. It isn't right in your face, but similarly to Astroneer, it comes from the hilarious things, the hilarious possibilities allowed through the physics system. There's so many different things that you can do to propel and ragdoll your character, or even launch yourself into the atmosphere. You can see I got a cannon here. It launches me pretty far. If I got my jetpack on, I can use that propulsion, that forward momentum, to go even further. Oh, I overshot it. Oh, crap. Oh, man. Okay, I'm alive. Barely. Almost ran out of fuel there. That's just one of the many cool, funny, honestly quite humorous things that you can do with the physics system in this game. And that might not even be the best example, so let's see if we can find a couple more for you guys here. One of the things that me and my buddies found out in the multiplayer session actually was that these giant land whale tick things are bouncy. If you can manage to land on it properly, there you go. Look, so I'm not actually using my jetpack or anything at all now. I'm just keeping myself over it with WASD. And you'll notice that each time I land it feels like I bounce a little higher. So this is just another example of one of the hilarious wonky things that you can do with the physics system in this game. Another mildly entertaining thing in this game that I find quite humorous is that if you get hit by one of your trucks, your character basically just ragdolls. So you don't take damage, you don't die, you just kind of ragdoll off and go in a really funny position. So let's take a look at that right here. Here comes the truck. I was going the wrong way. Hey, Mr. Truck. Oh no, bam. Oh crap. Okay. That wasn't as good. Sometimes you go flying really far and it's absolutely hilarious. But you get the idea here. Let's get this truck to hit me one more time. Hurry up, Mr. Truck. Do your unloading thing. Yeah, just drop right on top there. Come run me over. No big deal. It's all good. It's your job, I promise. Just run your master over. Oh, crap. I just got plowed over. Character ragdolls. You can see that my health is just fine. Sometimes you can get your character to go flying from that, and it's a lot funnier. So I felt like that wasn't the best example, but you guys get the idea. Another hilarious aspect of this game is none other than the factory cart. Factory cart, I recommend unlocking it early on, as I said earlier. You can pretty much pick it up and put it anywhere, and it's this dinky little cart. The door is always open. Bam, there it goes ajar. It's really speedy, but it always leans to the right, maybe because the door is ajar, so it's always turning slightly right, so you gotta tap left all the time. You can go real quick with it, and you can suddenly stop. And it's just, there's so much hilarity ensues with these things. There's just so much you can do. You can make a giant, like, skate park with half pipes and quarter pipes and stuff. And you could easily send these things flying. And you can use it to not take fall damage sometimes. And then sometimes you do take fall damage. So let's let the fates decide here. If I fall off this part here... Oh, that's not going to work. Okay, let's find a better place to fall off. It does not stay up very well either, which adds to the comedy of it. Okay, so if I fall off here, go spinning. Oh, no fall damage that time. Awesome. Sometimes you'll randomly take it. And then another really funny thing is trying to control this thing in the sand here, in the dirt. It just goes all over the place. It's absolutely great. And this is one of the reasons that I was scoring Satisfactory's humor aspects so high. Now, you can find humor in other aspects of this game. For example, there's a lot of really funny things written here in the hub. There's subtle little comedic aspects also presented through Ada, some of the stuff that she says, some of the tool tips. There's more funny writings here in the bathroom. Let me see if I can remember. Oh, the flashlight doesn't help. But yeah, some not so great words there. But you get the idea. It's hilarious. It's really funny at times. And most of the machines have funny names that represent the jobs that they do. So let's take a look at some of the funny names here. And this is kind of a subtle little detail that you have to really look for. Okay, so this one here, the smelter. Oh no, let me see it closer. The smelter is called 5M3LT3R700, which is obviously smelter. So that one is not as comedic. It's kind of funny, but I do recall some of the other ones being even more hilarious. So this is one of my favorites over here. We're going to go ahead and take a look again at the awesome sink, which I was showcasing earlier in the video. And if I could find the name on it, there it is. I Crush 500. That's hilarious. And then there's like a shredder and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's another reason that this game had all its funny little kind of quirk and charm for me, which is why I gave Satisfactory's humor level a solid 5 burgers out of 5. Wrapping things up, I just wanted to go over my overall impressions of Satisfactory. Overall, I give Satisfactory a solid 4 burgers out of 5. Satisfactory is an absolute gem, and pretty much a gold standard in the world of factory and automation games, falling short of only the absolute masterpiece that is Factorio. Factorio sets the bar pretty dang high, so it's hard to even compete. That being said, there are areas that could still use improvement, so I could not rightfully give it a solid 5 burgers out of 5. Despite the non-perfect rating, I would not hesitate one bit to highly recommend this game to anyone who is interested in math, in ratios, in automation, production, assembly lines, and factory-style games. Even if you aren't a math person like yours truly, you can easily adjust your playstyle accordingly and find plenty of joy in this game. Maybe it'll even help you discover a love or appreciation for numbers that you never knew was there. Keep your eyes peeled for the next review. Thanks so much for watching, and have a good night.